Stop. Don't scroll. You need to hear this. We've all felt it, that gut-wrenching feeling of being the backup plan. The consolation prize. But what if the person pushing you away was actually shielding you from a bullet? Today, we are diving into the story of Cora Halloway and Damon Sterling. It's a story about power deception and a love so dangerous it had to be kept in the dark to survive. She told him, "I'm nobody's second choice." But when the Alpha King finally spoke the truth, it changed everything. This isn't a fairy tale. This is a war for the heart. Let's get into part 1. The champagne flute didn't break when Cora Halloway squeezed it. It just vibrated a high-pitched hum against her palm that matched the anxiety thrumming in her veins. She shouldn't be here. That was the first rule of survival in the Sterling pack. Keep your head down, do your job, and never look the Alpha in the eye. But tonight was the Winter Solstice Gala, and the staff was short-handed. So here was Cora, 23 years old, invisible in her black server's uniform, holding a tray of crystal glasses while the wealthiest wolves in North America decided the fate of their territories. The ballroom of the Sterling estate was a masterpiece of old money and new violence. Chandeliers the size of small cuss hung from the ceiling, casting fractured light over men in tuxedos who could rip a throat out with their teeth, and women in silk gowns who would cheer them on. "Champagne," Cora murmured, extending the tray to a passing couple. They took the glasses without looking at her. To them, she was furniture. "Did you hear?" the woman whispered, sipping the drink. "Alpha Damon is making the announcement tonight." The man chuckled a low, rumbling sound. "Finally. The alliance with the Northern Pax needs to be solidified. Lydia is the only logical choice. She's a pure-blood daughter of Alpha Richard. It's a power match." "Poor Damon," the woman smirked. "Lydia is beautiful, but she has the warmth of an iceberg." Cora turned away, her chest tightening. Lydia. The name tasted like ash. Everyone knew Lydia Kensington. She was the definition of lunar material, tall, blonde, ruthless, and politically impeccable. She had been shadowed by Damon Sterling's side for the last 6 months, ever since he took the throne, following his father's suspicious death. And then there was Cora. Cora, who worked in the Pack archives, restoring old treaties. Cora, whose parents were nobodies, rogues taken in by the Pack out of charity 20 years ago. Cora, who had spent every Tuesday night for the last 2 years, sitting on the floor of the Alpha's private library, reading poetry to Damon while he worked, because he said her voice was the only thing that quieted the wolf inside him. He's going to marry her. Cora thought, the reality finally piercing through the quiet bubble of denial she'd been living in. Those Tuesday nights, they meant nothing. I was just the stress relief, the placeholder. Suddenly the room went silent. The heavy oak doors at the top of the grand staircase groaned open. Damon Sterling stepped out. At 6'4", Damon didn't just occupy space. He commanded it. He wore a tuxedo that cost more than Cora's entire life's earnings, tailored to fit broad shoulders that carried the weight of a kingdom. His hair was dark, swept back, and his eyes were the color of storm clouds, grey, turbulent, and currently scanning the room with predatory precision. Cora tried to shrink back into the shadows of a marble pillar, but it was useless. His gaze snapped to her. Across 300 people, across the expanse of the ballroom, he found her. For a second, the mask slipped. The cold, imperious Alpha King vanished, and she saw him, the man who had laughed softly when she mispronounced a French word in a poem last week. The man who had touched her cheek with a reverence that made her knees weak. His jaw tightened. He looked away, severing the connection. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice boomed. It was Elias Sterling, Damon's uncle, and the current pack advisor. Elias stood next to Damon, a serpent in a silk suit. "Thank you for joining us on this auspicious night." Damon stepped up to the microphone. His voice was a deep baritone that vibrated through the floorboards. "We live in dangerous times." He began, his face devoid of emotion. "Strength is not just in claws and teeth, but in unity." He extended a hand toward the side of the stage. Lydia Kensington glided out. She looked like a diamond come to life, wearing a silver gown that clung to every curve. She took Damon's hand, her smile triumphant. "I am pleased to announce," Damon said, his voice flat, mechanical, "my engagement to Lydia Kensington. The union of the Sterling and Kensington packs will ensure a century of peace." Applause erupted. It was deafening. Wolves howled their approval. Cora felt the tray in her hand tip. She corrected it instantly, but the damage was done internally. It felt as if a physical blow had struck her solar plexus. He did it. He actually did it. Lydia leaned in and kissed Damon's cheek. Damon didn't pull away, but he didn't lean into it either. He stood like a statue. Cora turned on her heel, abandoning her station. She pushed through the kitchen doors, ignoring the head caterer shouting at her. She burst out into the cool night air of the servants' entrance, gasping for breath. It started to rain, a cold, biting drizzle, typical of November in Seattle. "Stupid," she whispered to herself, wiping a tear that betrayed her anger. "Stupid, stupid girl. You thought the king would choose the mouse. She wasn't going to stay and watch. She wasn't going to serve champagne at his wedding. She was done." Cora's apartment was a small studio on the edge of the packlands provided for low-ranking staff. It was cozy, filled with books and plants, but tonight it felt like a prison cell. She threw clothes into a duffel bag indiscriminately. Sweaters, jeans, her toothbrush. She didn't have much. She had saved enough money to get a bus ticket to Oregon. There was a neutral territory pack there, the Blackwood Pack. They accepted refugees. She could work in a library there. Start over. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was heavy, authoritative. Cora froze. She glanced at the clock. 2 a.m. Cora opened the door. Her heart hammered against her ribs. It was him. She zipped the bag shut. "Go away, Alpha. Open the door, or I will take it off its hinges." The voice wasn't shouting, which made it scarier. It was calm, controlled, and left no room for negotiation. Cora marched to the door and threw the bolt. She swung it open, ready to scream at him. Damon stood in the hallway, soaked. He must have run here. His tuxedo jacket was gone, his white dress shirt clinging to his chest, translucent with rain. His hair was plastered to his forehead. He looked walled. He pushed her into the apartment, kicking the door shut behind him. "You're packing," he said, staring at the duffel bag on her bed. It was an accusation. "I'm leaving," Cora said, her voice shaking, but her chin held high. "I put in my resignation with the head of staff an hour ago via text. I'm free to go." "You aren't going anywhere," Damon growled, pacing the small room. He looked too big for the space. "It's not safe." "Not safe?" Cora let out a bitter laugh. "You just announced to the world that you're marrying Lydia. The only thing unsafe for me here is the heartbreak of watching you parade her around." Damon stopped pacing. He turned to her, his eyes blazing. "You think this is about what I want? Do you think I want that ice-cold socialite in my bed? It doesn't matter what you want, Damon. It matters what you did." Cora stepped closer, poking him in the chest. You looked at me. Every Tuesday. You told me things you've never told anyone. You made me feel like I mattered. You do matter, he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. He reached for her, but she slapped his hand away. No, Cora shouted. Tears were streaming freely now. I'm not going to be your mistress, Damon. I won't be the secret you keep in the library while you play king with Lydia. I saw the way she looked at you. She owns you now. She grabbed the handle of her bag. I'm nobody's second choice, Damon. I won't be the runner-up prize. Damon moved faster than human eyes could track. One moment he was by the window, the next he was in front of her, his hand slamming against the doorframe, blocking her exit. The air in the room grew heavy with the scent of ozone and cedar, his scent amplified by his agitation. Second choice. He repeated the words, sounding foreign in his mouth. He loomed over her, his breathing ragged. He looked exhausted, like a man who hadn't slept in a month. Is that what you think? He asked. You think you're the second choice? You proposed to her. I am forming a contract, Damon roared the alpha command, slipping into his voice, making the windows rattle. Cora flinched, and he immediately softened, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath to rein in his wolf. When he opened his eyes again, the grey storm was gone, replaced by a raw, bleeding honesty. Lydia is a shield, Cora. She is a wall of thorns I am building around the only thing that actually matters. He reached out, and this time when he cupped her face, she didn't pull away. His thumbs brushed the tears from her cheeks. I have been fighting a war since the day my father died, Damon said intensely. The council, my uncle Elias, the Northern Pax, they are all looking for a weakness. They want to find the one thing that can bring me to my knees so they can cut its throat. He leaned his forehead against hers. She could feel the heat radiating off him. I proposed to Lydia because no one cares about Lydia. She is predictable. She is safe because I don't love her. If they strike at her, I can fight back with a clear head. Cora's breath hitched. Damon, but you, he whispered, his thumb tracing her lower lip. If they knew about you. If they knew that you are the only reason I haven't burned this kingdom to the ground, they wouldn't just kill you, Cora. They would use you to break me. He looked deep into her eyes, searing the words into her soul. I'm nobody's second choice, she had said. You've always been first, he replied. You were first before I knew your name. You were first when you walked into my library 2 years ago, and you will be first until the day I die. That is why I have to marry her, to keep you alive. Cora stood stunned, the duffel bag sliding from her shoulder to the floor. The world tilted on its axis. He wasn't rejecting her. He was hiding her. But, Cora stammered, trying to process the shift, if you marry her, we still can't be together. It's over. Damon's expression hardened. A dark, dangerous look crossed his face, the look of a king who had already calculated the moves on the chessboard. The wedding is in 3 months, he said. A lot can happen in 3 months. I don't intend to say I do. I intend to expose the traitors in the council, but I need time, and I need you to trust me. He stepped back, running a hand through his wet hair. But I can't leave you here alone. Not anymore. Elias suspects something. He saw me looking at you tonight. Cora felt a chill run down her spine. Elias? Pack your things, Damon said, grabbing her bag. You aren't going to Oregon. You're coming to the safe house. It's an off-grid cabin in the mountains. No electronics, no contact with the outside world. You're kidnapping me, Cora asked, half joking, half terrified. I'm stashing my heart where no one can find it, Damon said, opening the door and checking the hallway. Now move. We have 5 minutes before my security detail realizes I'm gone." As they ran out into the rainy night, jumping into Damon's sleek black Aston Martin, Cora realized the truth. She wasn't the invisible girl anymore. She was the Alpha's greatest weakness and the most hunted woman in the territory. The engine roared to life, and as they sped toward the mountains, Cora watched the lights of the pack lands fade. She was the first choice. But being first might just get her killed. The safe house was not a cabin. That was the first lie Damon had told her. As the Aston Martin crunched over the gravel driveway deep within the Black Ridge Mountains, Cora stared up at a structure made almost entirely of steel and reinforced glass, cantilevered over a rushing waterfall. It was architectural perfection, hidden behind a dense veil of pine and enchantment wards that made the air shimmer like a heat mirage. "This is where you go to hide?" Cora asked, stepping out of the car. The air here was thinner, crisp, and smelling of snow and pine resin. "This is where I go to think," Damon corrected. He popped the trunk and slung her bag over his shoulder. "And now, it is where you will stay, Allaire." Inside the house was modern and cold, a stark contrast to the warm, book-filled library where they had fallen in love without realizing it. Damon moved through the space with efficiency, tapping a code into a security panel. Steel shutters retracted from the windows, revealing a panoramic view of the moonlit forest. "There is food in this pantry for a month. The water is filtered from the source. The perimeter has motion sensors that will alert my phone directly." Damon listed the features like a general briefing a soldier. He turned to her, his face grim. "Do not leave the house. Do not open the door for anyone but me. If the alarm trips, go to the panic room in the basement." Cora stood in the middle of the living room, hugging her arms around herself. "And where will you be?" "I have to go back." Damon said the words heavy. "If I am missing at sunrise, Elias will spin a narrative that I am unstable. He will try to invoke the Regency Act to take control before the wedding." "So you go back to her," Cora said quietly. She didn't mean it to sound accusatory, but it did. Damon crossed the room in 2 strides. He didn't touch her this time. He stopped inches away, as if he didn't trust his own control. "I go back to the war," he corrected. "Lydia is a battlefield, Cora, not a lover. She's beautiful, Damon. She's powerful. She's what a king is supposed to have." Cora looked down at her own worn sneakers. "I'm just the girl who dusts the archives. Look at me." She didn't. "Cora, look at me." He hooked a finger under her chin and tilted her head up. His grey eyes were swirling with gold, his wolf pushing to the surface. "Do you know why I spent every Tuesday with you? Because I read poetry well. Because you are the only person in that entire pack who tells me the truth," Damon said fiercely. "Lydia tells me what I want to hear. Elias tells me what manipulates me. The council tells me what profits them. You told me my tie was crooked. You told me that the tax hike on the Omega sector was cruel. You told me that I looked tired." He leaned in his voice, dropping to a rumble. "A king doesn't need a trophy, Cora. He needs an anchor. You are my anchor." The tension in the room spiked. It would be so easy to close the gap, to let him kiss her, to forget the politics and the danger. Damon's gaze dropped to her lips, and his pupils dilated. But he pulled back, a muscle feathering in his jaw. "If I start this now," he murmured, "I will not be able to leave. And I must leave." He stepped away, the loss of his body heat making Cora shiver. He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the biometric scanner. "I will return in 2 days. There is a tablet on the counter. It is encrypted. You can watch the news, but do not log into any personal accounts. Do not signal your location." "Damon." He glanced back. "Be careful," she whispered. He gave her a rare, genuine smile, the one that transformed his face from a statue to a man. For you always. The door clicked shut. The locks engaged with a heavy thud-thud-thud. Cora was alone. The first day passed in a blur of anxiety. Cora explored the house. It was beautiful but impersonal. She found a bookshelf in the bedroom, but unlike the chaotic loved piles in the Pack library, these books were pristine, arranged by color. She spent hours pacing. She turned on the encrypted tablet and watched the local news. The headline made her stomach churn. Royal engagement. Alpha King, Damon Sterling to wed Lydia Kensington in solstice ceremony. The video showed footage from the gala. There was Damon looking stoic and regal. There was Lydia clinging to his arm, beaming like she had won the lottery. "Liar," Cora whispered at the screen. But she couldn't tell if she was calling Lydia a liar for her fake smile, or Damon for making promises he might not be able to keep. By the evening of the second day, the silence was deafening. Cora decided to distract herself. She went to the kitchen to make tea. As she reached for a mug in the upper cabinet, her foot slipped on the polished concrete floor. She grabbed the edge of the granite island to steady herself, and her hand brushed against the underside of the countertop. There was a button. It wasn't a light switch. It was concealed flush against the stone. Curiosity, that fatal flaw of all archivists, took over. She pressed it. A section of the wall in the hallway, previously covered by a large abstract painting, clicked and swung open. A safe. Cora's heart raced. She shouldn't look. Damon had secrets. He was the king. But he had also said she was his anchor. Anchors needed to know what they were holding on to. She walked over. The safe wasn't filled with cash or gold. It was filled with files. Old yellowing files. She pulled the top one out. Stamped in red ink across the front was the word classified. Below that, in handwriting she recognized as Damon's father's, was a name. Project Genesis. Subject, the Halloway bloodline. Cora froze. Halloway. That was her surname. Her hands trembling, she opened the file. It wasn't about her. It was about her parents. The parents, she was told, were nobodies. Rogues who died of a Basra. An entry. October 12th, 2003. Alpha Richard Sterling. Damon's father. The experiment was a success. The Halloway gamma strain carries the recessive gene capable of breaking the silver bond. We had to eliminate them to prevent the council from weaponizing the child. I have taken the daughter in. We will hide her in plain sight. She must never know what she is. Cora dropped the file. The papers scattered across the floor like dead leaves. They didn't die of exposure. She gasped, the room spinning. He killed them. Damon's father killed them. And Damon, did he know, was keeping her safe? Actually, keeping her contained. Was she a prisoner in this glass cage? Before she could process the betrayal, the lights in the house flickered and died. The smart glass windows, which had been opaque for privacy, suddenly turned clear. Outside in the darkness of the woods, 6 pairs of glowing yellow eyes stared back at her. The motion sensors hadn't tripped. The alarm hadn't sounded. Someone had the access codes. Back at the Sterling estate, the air in the war room was choked with cigar smoke and tension. Damon sat at the head of the mahogany table, his face a mask of bored indifference. Across from him sat Elias, his uncle, who was currently swirling a glass of scotch and looking far too pleased with himself. Next to Elias was Lydia, looking perfect and bored, checking her nails. The Northern Alliance is demanding a readjustment of the border, Elias said, sliding a map across the table. If we give them the Shadow Valley, they will sign the treaty before the wedding. Shadow Valley is a strategic choke point, Damon said, his voice level. If we give it up, we leave our western flank exposed to rogue incursions. No. You are being stubborn, nephew. Elias smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Marriage requires compromise. Leadership requires sacrifice. I am sacrificing enough, Damon said, his eyes flicking briefly to Lydia. Lydia let out a sharp laugh. Oh, don't be so dramatic, darling. It's not like you're saving yourself for a love match. We all know the rumors. Damon went still. What rumors? The little maid, Lydia drawled, looking up from her nails. The one with the mousy hair. Cora, was it? She vanished the same night you left the gala early. Coincidence? Elias leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with malice. We were worried she might have stolen something, so I sent a security team to retrieve her. Damon's heart stopped. The wolf inside him roared, slamming against his rib cage. He kept his face impassive, but his hands gripped the arms of his chair so hard the wood splintered. She resigned, Damon said calmly. She went to Oregon. Did she? Elias took a sip of his scotch. Because my tracker Silas, you know Silas, the one with the nose for magic. He picked up a very distinct trail. Not to Oregon, but to the Black Ridge Mountains. Damon stood up. The chair flew back, crashing into the wall. If you touched her, Damon said, his voice dropping to a demonic octave, I will rip your head off in this room. Touch a nerve. Elias stood up too, his own beta wolves flanking him. You are weak, Damon. Sentimental. You hid a rogue in the royal safe house. That is treason. The council will strip you of your title. I don't care about the title, Damon roared. Call off your dogs. Too late. Elias checked his watch. They should be breaching the perimeter right about now. At the safe house, Cora was not waiting to be rescued. The moment the lights died, she knew she had seconds. She dropped to the floor, crawling towards the kitchen island. The glass walls were indistinguishable from the air in the dark, but she saw the shadows moving outside. They were in human form, carrying tactical gear. Mercenaries. Think Cora. Think. She was an archivist. She read history. She read strategy. She knew that the Black Ridge safe house was built on top of an old silver mine. She scrambled to the pantry. Damon had said the panic room was in the basement, but if they had the codes, the panic room was just a coffin. She needed a weapon. The front door hissed open. Check the perimeter. Find the girl. Make it look like a break-in gone wrong, a rough voice commanded. Boots crunched on the glass of the living room floor. Cora grabbed a bottle of high-proof vodka and a lighter from the emergency kit in the pantry. It was crude, but it was a distraction. She crept toward the basement door, but a heavy hand grabbed her hair. Gotcha, a voice sneered. Cora screamed and twisted, swinging the vodka bottle. It connected with the man's temple, shattering. He grunted, staggering back, wiping blood and alcohol from his eyes. You little bitch! He lunged. Cora dropped the lighter. Whoosh! The alcohol on his face and tactical vest caught fire. The mercenary howled, batting at the flames. Cora didn't wait. She bolted for the basement door, threw it open, and ran down the concrete stairs. But she didn't go into the panic room. Instead, she found the maintenance hatch she had seen on the schematics in the library files years ago. She yanked the rusty wheel. It groaned, but turned. She went downstairs. Footsteps thundered above her. Cora squeezed through the hatch just as the basement door was kicked open. She found herself in a damp, rocky tunnel, the old mine shaft. She ran. The air was stale, smelling of sulfur and earth. She had no light guiding herself by the wall. Suddenly, The tunnel opened up into a cavern. Moonlight filtered in from a crack in the ceiling high above. And there, standing in the center of the cavern, was a man. He wasn't one of the mercenaries. He was wearing a long grey coat, and he held a cane topped with a silver wolf's head. "Hello, Cora," the man said. His voice was smooth, like velvet over gravel. Cora stopped, backing up against the rock wall. "Who are you?" "I am the one who has been waiting for you to grow up," he said. He stepped into the moonlight. It was a man she had seen in history books. A man who was supposed to be dead. "Sebastian," she breathed. "The exiled?" "Damon's father killed your parents to hide you," Sebastian said, walking slowly toward her. "But do you know why?" "Because of my genes." Cora stammered, her mind flashing back to the file. "The gamma strain." "No, child." Sebastian smiled, and his teeth were too sharp. "That was the cover story. He hid you because you are not a gamma. You are not a rogue." He stopped 3 feet from her. "You are the only living descendant of the moon goddess's first pack. You are a truth seer. You can command any wolf to obey you. Even an alpha." Cora shook her head. "That's a myth. A bedtime story." "Is it?" Sebastian gestured to the tunnel behind her. The mercenaries had caught up. 3 of them burst into the cavern, guns raised. "Drop the weapon!" the lead mercenary shouted at Sebastian. Sebastian didn't move. He looked at Cora. "Test it. Tell them to stop." "Cora, get down!" the mercenary yelled, aiming his rifle at her. Panic surged through her. A primal, ancient energy erupted from her chest, hotter than fire, colder than ice. It wasn't a shifting of bones. It was a shifting of the air itself. "Stop!" Cora screamed. The word didn't just echo. It hit the mercenaries like a physical shockwave. The men froze, literally. Their muscles locked. Their eyes went wide with terror, but they couldn't lower their guns. They couldn't breathe. They were statues bound by the command of a superior authority. Cora gasped, falling to her knees. The energy drained out of her, leaving her trembling. Sebastian clapped slowly, magnificent. "Elias wants you dead because you are a threat. I want you because you are a weapon." He extended a hand. "Come with me, Cora. Damon lied to you. His family murdered yours. Join me, and we will take the throne that belongs to us." Above them, the sound of a helicopter rotor cut through the night. Damon had arrived, but as Cora looked at the man offering her revenge and thought about the files in the safe, for the first time she wasn't sure whose side she was on. The sound of the helicopter became a deafening roar, shaking dust from the cavern ceiling. A spotlight beam sliced through the crack above, blinding in its intensity, sweeping over the rocky floor until it pinned Sebastian and Cora in a circle of white brilliance. Sebastian didn't flinch. He looked up, shielding his eyes with a gloved hand, a twisted smile playing on his lips. Right on time. The prodigal son returns to bury his sins. Get away from her. The voice didn't come from the helicopter. It came from the mouth of the tunnel Cora had just fled through. Damon stood there. He wasn't the polished alpha in a tuxedo anymore. He was stripped to a black t-shirt, tactical vest, and combat boots. He was covered in grime blood, smeared across his cheekbone, and his eyes were glowing so bright they looked like molten gold. He held a semi-automatic rifle, but he dropped it. He didn't need bullets. His claws were fully extended, glistening like obsidian knives. "Damon!" Cora cried out the name, tearing from her throat before she could stop it. Even knowing what she knew, or what she thought she knew, seeing him sent a jolt of relief through her terrifyingly cold veins. Ah, the Alpha, Sebastian drawled, stepping behind Cora, using her as a human shield. He rested his cane on her shoulder. You're a little late. She knows Damon. She knows about Project Genesis. She knows your father ordered the hit. Damon's gaze flicked to Cora, wide with panic and betrayal. For a split second, his resolve faltered. The pain in his eyes was visceral. Cora, listen to me. Kill him, Sebastian commanded the mercenaries. The three men Cora had frozen with her voice were beginning to twitch. The command was wearing off. They shook their heads, shaking off the supernatural paralysis, and raised their weapons. Damon didn't wait. He moved with a violence that was terrifying to behold. He was a blur of motion, closing the distance to the first mercenary before the man could squeeze the trigger. There was a sickening crunch, and the man went flying into the rock wall. The second mercenary opened fire. Bang, bang, bang. The shots echoed like cannon fire in the enclosed space. Damon took 2 rounds to the chest plate of his vest, the impact staggering him, but he didn't stop. He roared a sound that vibrated in Cora's marrow and swiped the gun barrel aside, sinking his teeth into the man's shoulder. Sebastian tutted. So messy. Come, Cora. He gripped her arm, his fingers digging in like talons. He began dragging her toward a dark fissure in the back of the cave. No. Cora struggled, digging her heels into the dirt. I'm not going with you. You have no choice. He will imprison you again, Sebastian hissed. Cora, Damon shouted, throwing the second mercenary to the ground. He turned to charge Sebastian, but the third mercenary, the one Cora had burned, scrambled up and tackled Damon around the waist. It was just enough of a delay. Sebastian pulled a small glass vial from his coat pocket and smashed it on the ground. Thick purple succout exploded outward. It smelled of sulfur and wolfsbane. Cora coughed, her vision blurring. Damon. Let her go. Damon's voice came from inside the smoke, sounding choked. Wolfsbane was poison to him. Sebastian leaned close to Cora's ear. This isn't over, Truthseer. The council will come for you. And when they do, you will beg me to save you. With a shove, he pushed her away, sending her sprawling onto the hard stone floor. When the smoke cleared, Sebastian was gone. The fissure in the rock was empty. Damon was on his knees, coughing violently, black veins creeping up his neck from where he had inhaled the toxin. The 3 mercenaries were unconscious or dead around him. Cora scrambled over to him. Damon, Damon, are you okay? She reached for him, but then she remembered. The file. The murder. She froze, her hands hovering inches from his face. Damon looked up, his eyes bleeding back to their normal grey, though they were bloodshot. He saw her hesitation. He saw the fear. I didn't. He wheezed, grabbing her wrist and pressing her hand to his chest, right over his beating heart. I didn't know. Not until it was too late. The file said your father killed them, Cora whispered, tears stinging her eyes. It said, success. Read. The rest. Damon gasped. He reached into his tactical vest and pulled out a crumpled, blood-stained piece of paper. It was the second page of the file, the page she hadn't seen in the safe. Cora took it, her hands trembling. Entry. October 14th, 2003. Subject, Halloway, parents. Status failed. Correction. The assassination was not authorized by me. It was a rogue action by council member Elias Sterling. He poisoned their food supply to test the mortality rate of the Gamma strain. By the time I arrived to extract them, they were already dying. I could only save the child. I have falsified this report to success To convince Elias the threat is neutralized. If he knows the child lives, he will finish the job. Cora stared at the paper. The handwriting changed at the bottom. It was Damon's. Note found this in 2024. Elias is the architect. I am hunting for proof. The paper fluttered from her fingers. Damon hadn't been hiding her to keep her prisoner. He had been hiding her because his own uncle, the man currently running the pack, had murdered her parents to run a science experiment. Oh, God! Cora sobbed, the weight of the truth crushing her. I almost went with him. Sebastian. He was working with Elias. Sebastian is Elias's brother. Damon gritted out, forcing himself to stand, using the wall for support. The one we exiled 10 years ago for dark magic. They are working together. He looked at her, his face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. The wolfsbane was working fast. We have to go, he said, his voice straining. Elias knows you're here. He knows I'm here. He's going to bomb this mine to bury the evidence. As if on cue, a low rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. Dust rained down. Can you walk? Damon asked. Can you? Cora countered, looking at the black veins on his neck. I'm the Alpha. Damon smirked weakly, though he looked ready to collapse. I'll walk when I'm dead. Move. They barely made it out. They scrambled up the ventilation shaft, just as the charges detonated below. The ground heaved, and the glass house, the beautiful multi-million-dollar cage, shattered, sliding down the cliffside into the waterfall below. They watched from the tree line, huddled in the mud, as the fireball consumed the only sanctuary they had left. He thinks we're dead, Cora whispered. She was shivering, adrenaline crashing hard. Good, Damon said. He was leaning heavily against a pine tree, his breathing labored. Dead people are hard to track. We need a hospital, Cora said, reaching for him. The wolfsbane. No hospitals. Damon shook his head. Elias has eyes everywhere. If we go to a hospital, we don't make it past triage. Then where? Damon looked at her, his eyes heavy. There is an old mechanic shop 10 miles south. The owner. He owes me a life debt. He's human. He won't be on the network. The trek was brutal. It took them 3 hours to cover the 10 miles through the dense forest. Cora had to support Damon's weight for the last mile. The mighty Alpha King, who could flip cars with one hand, was reduced to stumbling, feverish delirium. When they finally banged on the metal shutter of Miller's Auto Repair at 4:00 a.m., Cora was exhausted. An old man with grease-stained overalls opened the door with a shotgun. When he saw Damon, he dropped the gun. Jesus, kid, the man muttered, dragging them inside. They laid Damon on a cot in the back office. The mechanic Miller went to get a first aid kit and some homemade moonshine. Clears out the poison, he claimed. Cora sat on the floor beside the cot, holding Damon's hand. He was burning up. Cora, he mumbled, his eyes fluttering open. I'm here. The wedding, he rasped. What time is it? Cora checked the clock on the wall. It's 5:00 a.m. The ceremony is at noon. Damon tried to sit up, but groaned and fell back. I have to stop it. If he marries Lydia to his puppet, he takes full control. He'll hunt you down. You can't even stand Damon, Cora argued, wiping his forehead with a rag. You aren't going anywhere. I have to, he insisted, his voice cracking. I promised you'd be first. Cora looked at him. Really looked at him. This man had taken a bullet for her. He had borne the hatred of his own pack to protect her. He had let her believe he was a villain so she wouldn't have to carry the burden of her parents' murder. She stood up. The fear that had defined her life, the fear of being seen, of being known, evaporated. In its place, something hot and fierce ignited. It was the power she had felt in the cave. The Truth Seer. "You're right," Cora said, her voice steady. "We can't let him win." She walked over to a dirty mirror hanging above the sink. She looked at her reflection. Her hair was matted with mud, her face scratched, her clothes torn. She didn't look like a Luna, she looked like a survivor. She turned back to Damon. "You can't stop the wedding, Damon. You're dying." Damon closed his eyes, defeated. "I know." "But I can," Cora said. Damon's eyes snapped open. "No. Cora, absolutely not. It's suicide. You can't walk into the lion's den alone." "I won't be alone," she said. She walked back to him and kissed his forehead. "I'm going to go get your army." "What army?" Damon asked, confused. "The Council controls the soldiers." "Not the soldiers," Cora said, a dangerous glint in her eyes. "The people. The ones you helped, the Omegas you lowered taxes for, the staff you learned the names of, the archivists, the unseen." She grabbed the keys to the mechanic's truck from the hook on the wall. "Miller," she called out to the old man. "Keep him alive. I have a wedding to crash." "Cora!" Damon shouted, trying to rise, but the wolfsbane held him down. "Don't do this." She paused at the door, looking back at him one last time. "I'm nobody's second choice, Damon," she said, echoing the words she had said to him nights ago. "And I'm done hiding. Today the world finds out who I really am." She slammed the door and gunned the engine. As she drove toward the city, the sun began to rise, painting the sky in blood red. She had 6 hours to organize a revolution. 6 hours to master a power she barely understood. 6 hours to save the man she loved from the woman who wanted his crown. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, turning it on for the first time in days. It flooded with notifications. She ignored them all and opened the pack-wide emergency broadcast app access she had because of her archive clearance. She didn't send a text. She hit the live stream button. It wouldn't go to the main channels. Elias had those blocked. It would go to the internal staff network. The maids, the cooks, the drivers, the gardeners, the thousands of wolves who kept the Sterling pack running while the elite drank champagne. The camera focused on her face, muddy, bloody, determined. "My name is Cora Holloway." She spoke into the phone, her voice trembling slightly before finding its steel. "You know me. I serve your drinks, I file your papers, I am invisible. But today I need you to see me, because the king is down and the traitors are at the gate. If you have ever felt like a second choice, meet me at the cathedral at noon. It's time to take back our pack." She hit send. The war had begun. The Sterling Cathedral was a monument to excess. Stained glass windows depicted the first shifting of the moon, casting multicolored light over 500 guests, seated in velvet pews. At the altar, Elias stood in his officiating robes, looking benevolent. Beside him, Lydia Kensington waited, looking impudent. The clock struck noon. "Where is he?" Lydia hissed, leaning toward Elias. "If he stands me up."
Myself want to.
"He won't," Elias whispered back, his eyes scanning the crowd. "He's dead, buried under 1,000 tons of rock. I will announce his tragic accident after the vows. You will marry his cousin Thomas by proxy. The contract holds." "Dearly beloved," Elias began, his voice booming through the speakers. "We gather here today to unite 2 great houses." Boom! The heavy oak doors at the back of the cathedral didn't just open. They were blown off their hinges. Splinters rained down on the back rows. The crowd gasped, turning in unison. Silhouetted in the doorway against the blinding midday sun was a figure. Not a man. A woman. Cora Holloway walked into the cathedral. She wore no gown. She wore muddy jeans, a torn sweater, and combat boots. But the energy radiating off her was so potent it made the air shimmer. Behind her, the sunlight was blocked out by a wall of bodies. Hundreds of them. Kitchen staff in aprons, gardeners with shears, drivers in caps, archivists. The invisible army of the Sterling Pack flooded into the vestibule, silent and terrifying in their unity. Stop the wedding. Cora's voice didn't need a microphone. It carried the same supernatural resonance she had used in the cave. Security! Elias screamed, pointing a trembling finger. Remove this trash. 4 elite guards rushed Cora. Kneel! She commanded. The word was a hammer blow. The 4 guards dropped instantly to their knees, sliding across the polished floor, their heads bowed as if in prayer. The crowd screamed. Lydia took a step back, her face draining of color. Cora walked down the aisle. Her steps were slow, deliberate. The guests parted for her, like the Red Sea, terrified by the golden aura flaring around her. Cora Holloway. Elias sneered, though sweat was breaking out on his brow. The little maid. Did you come to clean up the confetti? I came to clean up the filth, Cora said, stopping 10 feet from the altar. She raised her phone, which was hooked up to the cathedral's audio system, via a Bluetooth hack she'd arranged with the IT guys in her army. Play it, she said. A recording blasted through the speakers. It was Sebastian's voice, clear as day, recorded on Cora's phone in the cave. Damon's father killed your parents, no child. That was the cover story. Elias wants you dead because you are a threat. I want you because you are a weapon. The gasp from the crowd sucked the air out of the room. The elders in the front row stood up, looking at Elias with horror. Lies, Elias shrieked. Deepfakes. She is a witch. And this? Cora asked. She pulled the blood-stained file from her pocket, the one Damon had carried. She threw it at the feet of the head elder. Read it. The elder picked it up. His hands shook. It is signed by Alpha Richard. It details Elias's unauthorized assassination of the Holloways. You killed my parents, Cora said, her voice trembling with rage. You tried to kill your own nephew, and you sold this pack to the Kensingtons for a mining contract. She pointed at Lydia. She knows. She signed the deal this morning. Lydia froze. I didn't... Enough, Elias roared. His human mask shattered. He shifted. It was a grotesque transformation, forced and violent. A massive black werewolf erupted from his robes, standing 8 feet tall. He lunged for Cora, jaws snapping, intending to tear her throat out before the truth could take root. Cora didn't flinch. She didn't shift. She simply raised her hand. She didn't use the voice this time. She used the truth. You are not the Alpha, she screamed. The command hit Elias mid-air. It stripped him of his dominance. It stripped him of his borrowed power. He crashed to the ground at her feet, forced back into human form, naked and shivering, unable to lift his head. The silence that followed was absolute. Then a slow clapping started from the back of the cathedral. Everyone turned. Damon Sterling leaned against the ruined doorway. He was battered, bruised, and looked like he had been dragged through hell. He was supported by Miller the mechanic. But he was alive. Damon, Lydia cried, trying to run to him to salvage her position. Damon ignored her. He limped down the aisle, his eyes locked only on Cora. He stopped in front of her. The crowd held its breath. You crashed my wedding, he said, a ghost of a smile touching his bloody lip. I hated the flower arrangements. Cora replied, tears finally spilling over. Daemon turned to the crowd. He looked at the elders. He looked at his uncle, cowering on the floor. Then he looked at the army of staff, standing behind Cora. For generations, Daemon said, his voice raspy but commanding, we have believed that power comes from bloodlines, from titles, from who sits on the high chair. He took Cora's hand. He raised it high, but today a girl with no name brought a king to his knees to save us from a tyrant. She is the truth seer. She is the one the prophecies spoke of. He turned to Cora, dropped to one knee, and bowed his head, a submission no alpha had ever performed for a non-royal. I told you, Daemon whispered loud enough for the front row to hear. You were never the second choice. Cora looked down at him, her heart overflowing. She pulled him up. Get up, Alpha, she said softly. We have a pack to rebuild. Daemon stood. He kissed her right there in front of the horrified Kensingtons and the cheering staff. It was a kiss of promise of equality and of a love that had survived the fire. The crowd erupted, not the polite applause of the gala, but the raw, raucous cheering of a people who had finally found a leader worth following. Lydia slipped out the side door. Forgotten, Elias was dragged away by the guards, and as the sun streamed through the broken doors, illuminating the dust and the debris, Cora Holloway, the nobody, the archive girl. The second choice stood at the center of the world, holding the hand of the king who had always put her first. And that is the story of Cora and Daemon. From the shadows of the library to the steps of the altar, they proved that true power isn't about status. It's about loyalty, truth, and the courage to fight for what you love. Cora thought she was a backup plan, but she was the blueprint for a queen all along. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this with a friend who needs a reminder that they are nobody's second choice. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story. I'll see you in the next one.